So picture this. You've just shot your dream wedding. This is the biggest contract that you've ever dealt with, and you experience a data loss. Or sometime down the line, the client decides to sue you for not meeting their expectations of the contract. Would you be able to take us away and walk us through one of these situations and from really step one to really the solution?
Absolutely. You know, and one of the things about the Indemnification Trust, which has been around for I think nearly 50 years at this point, is it's not like traditional insurance. The trust is actually a trust fund that members pay into when they pay their dues. At least certain categories of members that are covered. So in these situations, probably about 60% of our claims are revolving around data loss. The other 40% are dissatisfaction, claims that you missed shots, things like that are sort of endemic to the fact that as a photographer, you're the last vendor that if somebody is upset about something about their wedding, you're the last vendor they're talking to, and you're probably going to be the one that bears the brunt of any issues they're having. So unlike traditional insurance for errors and omissions, the Indemnification Trust is for photographers, is funded by photographers. And because of that, even though we are bounded by the trust declaration and what we can and can't do with those trust funds, one of the key things that we try to do is to make sure that rather than look for ways to deny coverage, we look for ways to cover the member under the scope of the trust. I think the other piece that's really vital to this as well is, you know, you're not dealing with some insurance adjuster who has no idea about your business. You're working through the trust with PPA and with our law firm, which has handled the trust for years and handled thousands of these claims and understands your business. And I think that's a key difference because it's not always just about resolving the claim. It's also sometimes about trying to find a way for the member, the photographer, to save face a little bit with the client and to continue a good business relationship if that's possible. So getting back around to the trust process, let's say you have that data loss, that your dream wedding turns into the nightmare because you can't deliver the images. In that particular case, first thing you're going to do is call PPA. 800-786-6277, if I'm recalling that correctly, and talk to member services. Oftentimes we will get members who get in this situation, and unfortunately the first thing to do is panic and freeze. They don't want to tell anybody anything, they don't want to talk to anybody, they just want it to go away. Don't do that. Call PPA, talk to member services, they'll take your information on your claim. They'll then forward that to our law firm, Meadows, Macy & Morris, and you'll hear from somebody from our firm, usually within one business day, often by email, to make contact. In a data loss situation, we're going to set you up with a company called OnTrack, which does data recovery. That process is fairly quick. We'll tell you how to do that. And the only thing you're responsible for on most systems is your $100 deductible if it's your first claim, plus the cost of any replacement media. So we try to get those turned around very quickly. The other piece of that, of course, is in the interim, while you're waiting for this process to hopefully play out with a positive recovery, talk to us, because this might be the first time in 10, 15, 20 years of doing photography that you're dealing with this situation.
Yep.
We deal with this every day. We've done this thousands of times. So if you need help navigating the situation with your client, we're happy to walk you through that as well. So there's really those two pieces of that. And of course, in the unfortunate event that the data is not recoverable, we're still going to work with you to come up with a solution that hopefully works for everybody.
Excellent. And so you touched on what the Indemnification Trust is, but it's a trust program, not an insurance program.
Absolutely, and that means if you have a claim, you don't have to worry about a premium going up or something like that. And the other piece of that is on the deductible side. If we have to pay out on a claim, then the deductible comes into play. If we're able to resolve this at a customer service level, which earlier intervention is better, but if we're able to resolve it with a customer service solution rather than a legal solution, then it's not going to cost you anything. And I think that's a great difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And OnTrack is the data loss provider for the trust, right?
Absolutely. And they're our first choice provider. They do good work for our members. There are situations where somebody forgets that they have trust coverage and goes out and goes to somebody else, and we talk about those issues and deal with those issues within the framework of the trust limitations. But ideally, once that data loss happens, first thing you do, call PPA. They'll put you in touch with us, we'll get in touch with you, we'll send you to OnTrack, and hopefully be able to get you taken care of without too much fuss.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the benefits that OnTrack provides for us is expedited service at no additional cost.
Exactly.
Yeah, so if you were to go through another data loss provider, then it would take even more time.
Or worse than that, they could charge you 3 times the regular amount for an
Correct.
expedited rate. Or there are other things. For instance, if the attempt fails, if they
Right.
can't recover the data, you're not going to get charged your deductible.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go with a different provider, that's probably going to happen.
Right.
So
Yeah, absolutely. And the only kind of additional cost would be the memory device that
That's right.
it is stored on.
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So important distinction between insurance, and the trust, and quick actions is critical. Like, what types of other claims besides data loss and negligence?
Well, really data loss and negligence, even though you don't think about a data loss being negligence, but
Yeah.
legally it is.
Yeah.
Negligence is a really broad scope of things, and like I said, it's about 40% of the claims we get. And this can be anything from, actually we've had this happen, it's been years. We had a photographer who had the wrong diopter on his viewfinder. He thought all of his images were in focus. He gets done with the wedding, gets back to the studio and realizes none of it is.
Oh, wow.
And so that kind of unfortunate situation, which he felt horrible about it. It was difficult. That sort of thing. Other things that we've covered, those general complaints that sometimes you get as that last vendor from the wedding that somebody has contact with. Years ago we had a mother of the bride, and we love our mothers of the bride, but we had a mother of the bride who complained that the photographer had not taken pictures of the more expensive centerpieces, only the cheap ones, and she wanted a full refund. So that's a kind of extreme example, but those are certainly things that we see. And the best thing about this is, even if you haven't done anything wrong, even what they're accusing you of is just crazy, it's still going to be covered under the trust if it's a claim of a negligent photographic act. So, not enough pictures or too many pictures of the stepmother or whatever, those sorts of things. And sometimes, it really just boils down to a client who ran out of money and is looking for one last refund. And even in those situations, if they're complaining about the quality of the work or the quantity of the deliverables or any of those things, that's certainly something that we can deal with. So those are the kind of things outside of data loss. On the data loss side, I will say, and I think I sort of alluded to this earlier, if you have a non-recoverable data loss, we can't do it, we can't get it back. We're then going to convert that claim over to a dissatisfaction claim so that you're still covered.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. So, yeah.
And so what sort of limitations or exclusions would be, some of the big ones?
Sure. Every member gets a copy of the trust declaration in their membership packet, but it's often one of those things that it's just extra paper, it's just an extra PDF. But it does include, the more comprehensive list of limitations. Some things that we can't do, we can't get anywhere near. If you get mad at the photographer down the street and you want to sue them, we're not going to talk to you about that. If you sue your client and they sue you back, and we've had that happen, that's not something the trust can handle either. Other things that we can't get into are things like intentional acts by you. If you go into your client's front yard and burn their album and they get mad, no, we can't help you with that. That's all on you. And we laugh about that, but these sorts of things have happened over the years. So the other important limitation is really on the data loss side of things.
Right.
There is a waiting period. There's not a waiting period for dissatisfaction claims, but for data loss claims, there's a 30-day exclusion period. And the reason we had to do that is some folks in the past, decided that, okay, my drive failed and I'm going to tell, PPA that it happened the day I joined. And while that hypothetically could happen, that rule is designed to protect the money that the members have put into the trust from being used for stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And you touched on the 30 days, very, very important. What about like an active contract? Like, would I be covered if I did a photo shoot for like a family member and decided to not have a contract because it was going to be, like no cost or low cost, or Like, should I have contracts in all of my jobs? Is maybe the question I'm trying to ask.
And the ideal answer is, you're talking to a lawyer, so
Yeah.
obviously we want you to have paper on everything.
Yes.
But the other thing what lawyers will tell you is, well, sometimes a written contract is the contract, and sometimes it's this contract that you kind of cobble out of 14 emails. Ideally, you're going to have everything in writing. Even if you don't, if you've got invoices, if you could prove there's a client
Yeah.
who is unhappy with you,
Yeah.
obviously we're going to talk to you, and there may be issues with that we need to deal with. But if somebody can claim that they contracted with you for services and you failed to provide them adequately, or failed to provide them all in the case of a data loss, that's something, if you're an otherwise covered member, that we're going to help you out with. So.
And then they also need to maintain their membership throughout the duration of the contract when it was being effectuated, correct?
Right. Well, not necessarily the entire contract, but the entirety of the claim. So
Right.
let's say you haven't joined PPA yet, and I don't know why you haven't done that. Let's say hypothetically you haven't. If you haven't joined PPA yet, you've got folks under contract. You join PPA, shoot a wedding or portrait session or a commercial job, any of those things, after you've joined. If the data loss or the problem occurs there, from that point forward until the conclusion of your claim, you need to maintain your membership. Now, we've got some safeguards built into that. We know that a lot of photographers take advantage of the monthly payment process that we have. And if you've got a card that expires and you're technically not a member for 2 weeks, that's not going to be a problem. We built that in so that lapses of less than 30 days won't hurt you. But yes, it's absolutely vital that you maintain membership from start to finish on the claim. Otherwise, you lose the protection of the trust.
Excellent. And who is eligible for protection?
So protection under the trust is individual, and this is actually an important thing. If you're a studio that uses independent contractors, make sure the folks shooting for you are PPA members, because it's not corporate, it's individual to that photographer. But as far as categories, and help me out if I miss any here. PPA active members, additional associate, limited, Canadian. Is there one more that I'm missing, or am I?
Well, there's just the full.
Full. Obviously the main category. So those categories are covered, and that's generally for work inside the U.S. and Canada. There is coverage if you shoot something and you have a data loss that's recoverable outside the country, but the data loss occurs here. We can still cover that. But that's generally the coverage scope there.
Okay. So for the non-members listening, what would be the biggest reason to become a member? Yeah,
the biggest reason, at least in regard to the trust to becoming a member, is getting that protection that is tailored for photographers, for what would traditionally be under an errors and omissions policy. Your regular policy, your equipment policy doesn't cover what to do when you lose all the images from a job. And you're not going to get that anywhere else. This is a PPA exclusive member benefit. Obviously, I've been involved with the trust for years. I think that's a huge benefit for members, but there are also several, the community that is provided through PPA, the education that PPA provides, certainly the copyright and government affairs advocacy that you do. All of those things are really important as part of that package. But if you're looking at it from a dollars and cents perspective only, forget all of those other things, but just from a dollars and cents perspective, you can't get the kind of coverage that you get through the trust for the price of your full PPA membership anywhere else. I don't think. I haven't found it. So.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. One more thing I just wanted to touch on, and you talked about if you have a studio and you have multiple employees, we have a lot of photographic companies, photographic businesses that have like a husband and wife, or two spouses that are shooting, doing different jobs. One's doing maybe videography, one's doing photography. How you want to make sure that they both have memberships, correct?
Yeah, that's unfortunately that's an issue we're running into all the time, because someone says, well, I'm the primary photographer, but my significant other does all the video.
Yeah.
Well, if you've got a claim that is just about the video, that takes you outside of coverage, because the issue is, who is the photographer responsible for creating the work?
Right.
That's what we look at. And so if that person is not a member, then it's not going to be covered. So we absolutely encourage you, if you've got multiple people photographing in your studio or for your studio, for all of them to be PPA members and part of the trust. That way we can cover those claims.
Yeah, thanks for that. And so, member or not, maybe the last question, what sort of advice would you have to offer?
Act early, act quickly. I am amazed at the number of photographers, and again, it's just a natural human reaction when you're in business by yourself.
Yeah.
And that's one of the great things about PPA is, you might be in business by yourself, but if you're with the trust and you're with PPA, you're not alone. Because we've got the experience, we've been doing this for years. We've been down this road with hundreds of photographers, thousands of photographers at this point. And so, act quickly, act early, try to get ahead of things. If you're a PPA member, right after something's happened, if you think you've got one going sideways, and that's not just on a data loss, but if you've got a client that just keeps moving the goalposts on you and can't be happy with what you're providing them, don't wait to get the lawyer letter. We have some folks who do wait until they've been sued, and we work with those folks, but what we found is we get much better results and much better results for photographers if they contact us early in that dispute process.
Yeah.
So.
Because y'all do so much, management of your own of the situation and reaching out to the.
Absolutely, and sometimes having a law firm send a letter to a client that has been, frankly, bullying you because you're just a photographer. We get some of those folks, and then okay, you got a letter from a law firm that says, no, here's the situation as we understand it. We haven't seen anything here that justifies this full refund and dragging this person through the public square and tarring and feathering them. So no. And that starts the process of trying to get those things done. And the other thing is, the earlier you contact us, if there's an opportunity in some situations, rather than a financial refund or something like that, if we could say, okay, look, this was a local portrait session, we can reshoot this. You can reshoot this. Let's get the client to agree to these things or a limited restaging. We've sent wedding dresses to cleaners. We've done that sort of thing. So we try to look for the best solution for resolving the claim, but also for, again, trying to keep the reputation of the photographer up.
Thank you for bringing up reshoots, by the way. They're not always offered, but they're sometimes offered. Yeah, tell us about how those are actually gone about.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. And reshoots are one of those things that we figured out a long time ago in doing the trust, that it's a way for us, when we can do it, to really, help salvage part of that photographer-client relationship sometimes. If you've got a portion of the coverage that's bad or is just missing, a reshoot or at least a limited restaging allows you to get that client some images. They may not have happened, of course, in the moment, but they've at least got that so that when they're taking their album or family portraits or anything like that, that they've actually got those memories. It's not always possible. Certainly, we don't fly people in from around the country to reshoot things, but we've cleaned a lot of wedding dresses over the years for reshoots. And that's part of the thing that makes the trust special is we're not just over here saying, okay, well, we're just going to throw money at this, or we're going to do this or that. We're trying to work with the photographer for the good of their business going forward, so that client is much less likely to say, oh my gosh, these people were awful. We want them to say, no, we had a problem and they fixed it. If we can do that, whether that's through data recovery or reshoot. And sometimes either of those things are possible, and it does come down to money. But really, we think a reshoot is a great tool in the arsenal to help our members.
Excellent. Well, Stephen, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today, and as well as everyone joining us right now, for walking us through the Indemnification Trust and how it will protect members and avoiding those problematic situations when they do arise. I want to thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Luke. It's been a pleasure.